Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Almost Awakened podcast. I am your solo host today, Teresa Hobbs. It's nice to be back after taking a break over the holidays. And, I hope everyone got through the holidays intact. I never assume that the holidays were always a joyful experience for people because for some people, they really weren't. Now, I've been wanting to do some solo podcast episodes on topics that I think will help people who are either deconstructing religion or working through relational trauma, and who are interested in psychoeducation around these topics. I feel like the more you understand the why of things, the more power you have. So that's my goal, and in these sort of one-sided conversations, and I hope that you'll find the information that I'm sharing useful. So today's episode is on codependency and how religious systems offer very fertile soil for codependency to grow. I've noticed that a lot of people in Mormonism in particular tend to have a lot of codependent patterns. So if you grew up monitoring other people's moods, if you learned to scan the room before you ever checked in with yourself, or if your body only relaxes when everybody else seems okay, then this episode is for you. I'm going to be talking about codependency today, but probably not in the way that you're used to hearing about it. My working definition of codependency is really simple. The definition is, I'm not okay unless you're okay. And I want you to just let that land for a minute. I'm not okay unless you're okay. And I want to start by saying that codependency is not a flaw. It is not a weakness. It's not being too much or too sensitive or bad at boundaries. Codependency is a survival adaptation. It develops when our nervous system learns, usually really, really early in life, that our safety depends on other people's emotional states. So instead of staying connected to self, we learn to stay hyper-focused on other. And this is connected to the survival wiring of our attachment systems. If we break connection, our system tells us that we are in threat of death. Like that, to be ousted from a group, to be lost from your attachment figure or your soul connection or group connection was dangerous. And so that is still really hardwired into our systems. Now, when we're codependent, we tend to manage proximity and relational safety by making adjustments to keep other people regulated. And sometimes, our goal is to keep other people regulated, but it's not, regulated is a loose term here. Sometimes we're just trying to keep people regulated enough. So regulation doesn't even have to be real. It just has to be perceived as real enough so that we can feel safe or safer. So it's, safe enough that they won't explode, safe enough that they won't emotionally collapse, or that they won't withdraw or disconnect, safe enough that we know that we've appeased them, and safe that we've prevented something bad from happening. That's what a lot of people feel inside when somebody else has a high emotional reaction or is feeling, off center. We feel like something bad's going to happen. So we become the fixers. We become harmonizers and soothers and emotional managers. And when we do this, we end up suppressing what we feel so that we can stay focused outside of ourselves, instinctively managing other people. We learn to regulate ourselves by regulating or managing other people. Now, there's a cost to this. On one hand, we can feel less afraid, but over time, this creates a deep disconnection from self. And I know a lot of people are like, well, why does that matter? But our awareness of our own sensations, our emotions, our needs, our impulses, and our limits will slowly fade when we're disconnected from self. And it's not because nothing is actually happening inside of us, but it's because there's actually no space or access for listening. We start to numb to our own internal experience. So when your attention is always outside of you, your body learns to go quiet. And it's not a peaceful kind of quiet. It's a disconnected kind of quiet. So you may notice things like not knowing how you feel, not knowing what you want, feeling kind of numb or flat. And a huge one is fatigue, feeling exhausted. And feeling exhausted, but also sometimes not being able to fully rest. So there's this kind of wired and tired feeling that you have. You can also notice patterns of resentment and then layered guilt on top of that resentment for feeling resentful. You may notice that you have difficulty making decisions without external validation, or that you feel anxious when other people are disappointed or they're upset or they go quiet, and a constant sense of responsibility for other people's emotions. You can have conversations and then overthink those conversations by replaying the interactions afterward, wondering if you, didn't say the right thing or if you said something that really upset another person. You can feel uncomfortable receiving care or help or attention, because when people start turning their attention towards you, you don't really know what to do with that. You can have issues or end up minimizing your own pain because others have it worse. So it's always kind of downplaying what you're feeling and keeping the focus again on other people. Because we're so disconnected from ourselves, we're not even tuning into the true impact that we feel inside. You can feel invisible, unappreciated, or taken for granted because you give and give and give and it doesn't return, because people become used to you being the one who overgives. And so they start to depend on that. You can feel on edge in conflict, really want to avoid conflict at all costs, even when it's mild or indirect. You can have difficulty resting unless everybody else is settled. So it's like you can't let go and rest until everything's put together, other people are feeling okay, and you know that there's nothing to manage outside of you. You can feel really disconnected from joy, from your own desires, or from a sense of playfulness. And you can have difficulty tolerating someone else's discomfort without intervening. This is really, really common for codependents, is that anytime you see somebody dealing with something, like maybe they have a problem or they're going through something, you can't stop yourself from intervening. It's like the most painful thing to think of, just allowing that thing to sit as it is. And you tend to feel safest when you are useful and you have a job, because codependency is a role that we play. We, codependents, and I say we because, by the way, I'm a recovering codependent. So I'm speaking on a topic I know really well about. Anyway, we feel safest when we're useful. We love to play the role of being needed or being indispensable. And it's really hard to let go of that. And so we can build a sense of identity around being the helper or the strong one. So again, if you're sort of like thinking through this and seeing if any of these things land for you, you may be a codependent. And I want to just be honest, because I didn't learn about codependency until about 5 years ago. And before that, I'd heard the term, many times, but I never identified with it. I couldn't see myself that way because I was always really independent. I was like the strong one. I was the overgiver. And so I thought codependency meant that like I was helpless and I had to rely on other people, and I didn't have a sense of self. And it does kind of mean you don't have a sense of self, but I didn't realize that about myself because I had strong opinions, and I just didn't feel that way. And I thought codependency meant that you were weak. And when I really learned what codependency was, again, it's like, I'm not okay unless you're okay. I started to reflect on how much energy I spent trying to harmonize and manage other people when they were going through some emotional moment. And then I was like, wow. And I really was disconnected from myself because I couldn't feel my own emotions. I would disconnect from my emotions so that I could manage somebody else's. And then all of my internal feelings got ignored, and they would build up over time. So right now I want to zoom out for a moment and talk about not just codependency, but codependency in systems. Because codependency doesn't just come from families or individual relationships. It can also be created by systems. And this is where it connects into Mormonism and high demand religions. So any system that ties safety, belonging, worth, or love to compliance, harmony, or emotional control is likely to produce codependent patterns. And these are systems where approval is conditional, where dissent is dangerous, where emotional expression is regulated or suppressed, and connection can be withdrawn if you step out of line. So in these environments, staying safe often means staying externally focused. So I'm just curious if hearing that, if anybody connects a particular system with those kinds of things. Approval is conditional, dissent is dangerous, emotional expression is regulated or suppressed, and connection can be withdrawn if you step out of line. Now, in these systems, people will learn very early that I'm okay if the system is okay. And I'm safe if I don't rock the boat. Or my needs don't matter as much as the group's stability. And discomfort means that I'm doing something wrong. So anytime you feel uncomfortable inside, you are registering that as you've stepped out of alignment with the system. And so the nervous system will adapt to this. Instead of tracking your own internal truth, it starts to track external cues. And it'll ask questions. Am I approved of? Am I aligned? Am I being faithful enough? Am I upsetting anyone? Am I still safe here? And that is codependency at a systemic level. And again, I've noticed a lot of Mormons show up with codependent patterns because the system trains people to be externally oriented. So from a very young age, members are taught to prioritize the needs of the church over their own personal needs. They're taught to suppress doubt for the sake of unity, to stay cheerful and faithful regardless of internal distress. It reminds me of the Netflix show Keep Sweet, Pray and Obey for the FLDS church. It's like whatever's going on, it's your job to present something positive and cheerful and to keep sweet. And that's more important than your own internal feelings. These systems also defer to authority for moral certainty. And they equate worthiness with behavior and compliance, right? So again, like think of the temple ordinance or the temple worthiness interviews. In order to be worthy, you have to have, had certain behaviors or paid your tithing or whatever it is. Like, I don't even know what the requirements are these days, but that's enough to start teaching you that your worthiness and behavior are tied to compliance. Or that your worthiness is tied to behavior and compliance. Now, you learn to manage your internal state by managing alignment with the system. And instead of learning self-regulation, people learn system regulation. And, it's like, I'm okay if God is pleased, or I'm okay if leadership approves, or I'm okay if my family isn't worried about me. And that's the same pattern that we see in relational codependency. It's just scaled up. So even though codependency makes sense, it does have a shadow side. And I want to talk about this without shaming people, because when our nervous system is terrified of rupture, we try to prevent it at all costs, even if that means losing authenticity. And again, this is deeply wired into our attachment system, and it is visceral, and it's a protective survival adaptation. So the shadow side of codependency is that it can become controlling. It can become manipulative, not intentionally, but through caretaking and managing other people's emotions. There's good intention behind it, but what happens with extreme codependency is that you become a controlling person trying to manage other people's feelings so that you feel okay. So if and this happens, with parents who are highly codependent. When their child is feeling upset, that parent will tell the child to stop it, to put a smile on their face, to feel better, because they need that person to display that they're okay so that they can feel okay inside. And another thing that happens with codependency is inauthenticity, because you're not actually showing up as you are. And codependents sometimes can martyr themselves. They can overgive and they can overfunction, and then resentment starts to build. And you can carry everyone else's emotional weight, but nobody is carrying yours, not even you. Your emotional weight basically gets shoved into dark recesses of your body. And eventually those suppressed emotions and sensations accumulate And when there's nowhere for them to go, the body starts to get louder. So people can experience burnout, shutdown, the freeze response, especially common is chronic fatigue, and physical symptoms, especially chronic pain. And again, this isn't a failure. This is just your nervous system being on overload, and it's an adaptation. It's a way that you've found to maintain safety in a chaotic environment. Now, there's a difference between hyperattunement and connection. And what we often call, being good at reading people is actually hypervigilance. It's scanning for threat, monitoring tone, it's tracking mood shifts and anticipating reactions. And codependents are really good at this. But true attunement actually includes the self. So codependency can look like attunement, but it's actually fear-based monitoring. And there's very little self-awareness, again, because we're so focused outside of ourselves. There's very little self-regulation because if we're not picking up on our own cues, we're not regulating our own response. We're doing it through an external channel. And there's very little room for our own emotions to show up. When we talk about codependency, we also need to talk about something called enmeshment. And enmeshment happens when there isn't a clear sense of where I end and you begin. Your emotional state affects my emotional state. Your discomfort feels like my responsibility. Your needs override my needs, and your feelings feel urgent in my body. Hi, everyone. I want to quickly mention something that we're going to be starting in mid-January that I'm really, really excited about. We are going to be opening up a second religious deconstruction support group because our first one has gone incredible. The depth of conversation in this group and how honest people can be, and it gives people this sense of relief that that they're able to speak openly and to be heard by other people who understand their story. So this group is going to be for people who are deconstructing or who have deconstructed from a high demand religious system, whether it's Mormonism or something else, and are still working through either the emotional, relational, or identity impact of that, or all of those things. We are going to be meeting every other week on Zoom on Tuesdays for 90 minutes. And this is going to go for about 10 months. Now, each session is going to include a short topic or some kind of teaching or framework. And then we're going to open up conversation and have shared processing. Now, this isn't therapy, it's a structured, supportive community space. And what's so powerful about this community space is that we learn by listening to each other's stories. I'm going to be co-facilitating this group with Bill Reel, and we're going to be keeping the group intentionally small. So right now for our second group, we've got people on the wait list and it is almost full. We just need about 4 or 5 more people to join before we decide that it's complete and we open and we'll essentially close registration. So if you are interested in this, and give you some details, this is going to be about it is $60 a month for 2 group meetings per month. So every other Tuesday is when it's gonna go. And if you've been feeling alone in your deconstruction, or like there aren't many places where you can talk honestly without being fixed or debated with or minimized, this might be a really, really good fit for you. So you can find all the details and the link to be able to sign up in the show notes. And I'm so excited to get this going and to see how the second group goes, because I've just been so moved and surprised every time we meet for this group, how much connection is felt there. And I know for so many people who have lost that sense of community and connection, it's invaluable. So I hope you'll show up for this group if it feels like it's a good fit. And again, the link is going to be in the show notes. In enmeshment, there is very little internal separation. And that's not because we are unhealthy people. It's because separation has, for most of our lives, felt incredibly unsafe and dangerous. So again, for many of us, staying connected meant staying merged. And enmeshment often develops in environments where, emotional boundaries weren't respected. This is one of the most fertile grounds for codependency is with highly narcissistic parents. Or actually, another fertile ground for codependency is a family where there were other codependents, because codependents tend to have really poor boundaries. They don't know what boundaries are. And so a lot of times there is an unintentional disrespecting of other people's boundaries. So it can develop in those types of environments, where children were expected to manage adult emotions or stay emotionally close to avoid abandonment, or to suppress their own reactions to maintain harmony, or to become the stable one in an unstable system. And a lot of times in family systems, there will be one person in the family system who tends to be the anchor or the harmonizer, and they are the one who becomes hypersensitive to everybody else's mood and is always trying to shift or change that mood. So instead of learning, the truth, which is I can be close and still be myself, what people learn in these family systems or church systems is I can be safe only if I stay emotionally fused. And this is where boundaries come in. And I love boundaries. It's another thing that I probably want to do some more episodes on to expand on, because boundaries are often misunderstood as walls or rejection, but they are one of the most powerful ways to create internal safety in our bodies. And a lot of times people think, especially for codependence, they think that boundaries are about pushing people away, but that's not true. Boundaries are actually about internal differentiation. They tell us and show us and display to us what I feel versus what you feel, what belongs to me versus what belongs to you. And without that differentiation, codependency thrives. Because in codependency, boundaries don't feel natural, they feel dangerous. So saying no can feel like you're risking that connection with someone. Letting someone be upset can feel like you're being incredibly rude or irresponsible. And allowing distance can feel like you are abandoning the other person. And it still is something that's hard for me. I have to call myself back into my body when I am holding boundaries with another person, or when I am allowing somebody to experience the fullness of their own choices or consequences. The minute, and this is very true for me too. I don't know how many people will relate with this, but I was raised in my family, and by extension in the larger culture of Mormonism, to pay special attention to male emotions. So it was unconsciously translated to me that men are too fragile to allow themselves to be activated or to feel any weight of emotional burden. And so the minute somebody in my family who was male started to feel things, I jumped into action. It was like, oh my God, I can't handle seeing that. And when I got older in my 20s and 30s, I started noticing the pattern of like, wow, I can handle women feeling their emotions a lot more than I can handle men feeling their emotions. Something inside me gets really activated when I see a man going through some emotional turmoil. And I think that's something that we get trained in unconsciously. So instead of boundaries, we will use proximity, we'll use appeasement or self-erasure to stay safe. And again, this makes sense. But here's the shift that is really important. Boundaries don't require emotional coldness. They don't require withdrawal. They don't require becoming less caring. Healthy boundaries actually allow more authentic connection, and they allow growth for other people. This is what's important, is when we stop accommodating or softening or cushioning the blow of an emotional response in another person, it gives them the opportunity to learn how to work with that without having to rely on somebody else to constantly, buffer that for them. And it really does allow for more authentic connection, because when I'm not responsible for regulating that other person, when I'm not responsible for regulating you, I can actually be present with you. And when I'm allowed to stay connected to myself, I don't have to control the relationship to feel safe. And that takes a lot of pressure off relationships. When you feel like it's your job to control the relationship in order to feel safe, that's so much pressure on a system. And you end up again holding resentment and just having really, really unhealthy dynamics in that. So enmeshment can feel like closeness, but it's actually the absence of choice. True connection includes self-awareness, emotional sovereignty, and the ability to stay with yourself while being with another person. So the question is, how do we work with codependency in a way that's actually embodied, that isn't forced, and that's not shaming or performative? And the answer to that question is that it starts with awareness. It starts with mindfulness. And the most important piece of mindfulness is non-judgment. So when we have non-judgmental awareness, when we can release the need to fix and we just settle with that awareness, we may start noticing some simple things. We might start noticing, like, that I'm tracking their mood more than my own body, or that I feel tension when they're upset, or that I don't actually know what I'm feeling right now. And that's good data. That's just good information. We don't have to judge it. We don't have to make it wrong. So after we are able to sort of drop in and notice without judgment, without fixing, just notice what we're noticing, notice what we're feeling, then we can bring in some curiosity. And that's a second layer to mindfulness. And we can ask questions like, what am I afraid would happen if I didn't fix this? And then just sit with it. We don't have to figure it out. We don't have to respond or fix that. We just sit with it. And what sensation shows up before I react? What sensation do I notice in my body before I react? And what part of me learned this strategy? And then very gently, we can start to invite micro moments of return to self, right? And these start with something as simple as just a hand on the chest. Just doing that allows my body to take a spontaneous, deeper breath. You can also notice your breath without changing it, just noticing the normal breathing pattern. Or you can feel your feet on the floor while you're in conversation with someone. That's a really good way to stay grounded in yourself. You can even, while you're having conversation with someone, pay attention to your dorsal, so the back side of your body. If you just focus on the sensation of your back, maybe you're standing and you're just feeling your back, or maybe you're sitting and you're feeling your back against a chair. That's a really good way to stay sort of present in your body while you're talking to another person, and it helps develop more self-awareness. Or you can just name, one internal sensation. And remind yourself, as you're doing this, as you're coming home to yourself and you're paying attention to you, you are not abandoning the other person. You're just coming back to yourself at the same time. And when we have this dual awareness, that actually creates the conditions for true connection. It feels very different than being like out of your body, and there's a term for it. Like, a lot of people identify as being an empath, and in high empathy, or what they term being an empath, you feel like everybody's emotions are just like attacking you. Because what happens is we sort of jump out of our body and we get like in this enmeshment phase with other people, and we have no boundaries and no protection. And so when we can start coming home to ourselves and feel ourselves and have a boundary between me and you, then we don't actually feel the intensity of other people's emotions in the same way, because we're paying attention to ourselves rather than taking on their emotional experience. Now, you don't heal codependency by becoming cold, detached, or selfish. Self-regard is not selfish. You heal codependency by becoming embodied or inhabited again, and by learning that your internal experience matters. It really does matter. It matters more than you know. And you heal it by learning that your body is allowed to take up space and that safety can live inside of you, not just between you and someone else, not just outside of you, because that really is where safety resides, inside. And it does take time to learn how to feel comfortable with ourselves and how to meet the sensations and feelings and emotions that we have inside. But that's where freedom lies. So the more regulated you become, the less you need to manage anyone else. That takes pressure off relationships. That allows you to be less judgmental of other people. It allows for a more authentic connection. And when we feel that we are showing up authentically, it translates back to us as feeling unconditionally loved and accepted. When we are performing or we are showing up in a way that's inauthentic, then it reinforces back to us that we're only acceptable if we perform in this way for someone else, or if we manage things for somebody else, or if we are the harmonizer or the buffer for other people. Now, I'm always a little bit worried that I'm getting too technical for people when I share this stuff. I love offering psychoeducation because it really puts you in the driver's seat and it gives you an understanding of why things are happening as they're happening. It also allows people to let go of shame and blame about their behaviors because almost everything we do as humans is adaptive in some way. It's how we've learned to cope with the hard things that we've gone through. And my intention in sharing this work is always to help people come back into a more honest relationship with themselves and to feel what they feel, to learn how to want what they want, and to stay connected to others without, losing themselves in the process. So if this stirred something in you, I hope that you will move gently with yourself. You really don't have to fix everything at once, and you don't have to have it all figured out. I really appreciate you being here and for being willing to look at the places where care for other people may have cost you care for yourself. I will see you next time on the next episode of the Almost Awakened podcast. Take care, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to the Almost Awakened podcast. For more tools, resources, and real talk about conscious living, visit almostawakened.org. That's almostawakened.org, your resource for waking up